Get started. Welcome to today's Mucker Growth Series sessions. We do these every month, and today, actually, if you don't mind going back, Haley,
Sure. Yep.
today's session, we are focusing on the topic of building and using AI in your startup. And I always get super excited when we could feature one of our portfolio companies, Octagos here, and I'll introduce them in a second. But before we do that, let me cover a few housekeeping items, and then we'll get started. So just to do a preemptive, because this is probably the most widely asked question in webinar history, which is, are we recording this session? The answer is yes. We record almost every one of these sessions. Very few occasions we don't, but this one we definitely are. And if you are interested in the recording as well as the slides, they will be posted on Mucker's blog without any forms. We don't believe in that. So you can get access to the full recording as well as all the slides, probably in a day or two. That's typically the amount of time we take to process everything and put it up there. If you want to stay up to date, definitely subscribe to Mucker's newsletter because we also do announce whenever things like this gets posted. So you can find that on Mucker's website, right? And then secondly, many of you guys have already found the chat bot or chat box, sorry, not the chat bot, chat box in the Zoom UI. Definitely feel free to put comments in there. But if you have any questions, specific questions that you would like to ask our speakers at any time, put those in the Q&A box because that will help us not have to sift through all the noise. And so we'll monitor the questions that come in through that section, and we'll try to address them on the spot if possible. If not, if we have time at the end, we'll get to the rest of the questions. Sounds good? All right. So today, I'm super excited to have two of our friends from Octagos Health, which is one of our portfolio companies, Preet and Haley. They wear multiple hats, like many of our startups that are in early stage, although they've been doing very well and have been growing quite a bit. So COO, CFO, CPO, CMO, all the C's, if you will. For those of you who are new to these sessions that we do, my name is Tony Yang. I run the growth practice here at Mucker. And we do these sessions where we talk about startup growth and other topics that founders and operators at early stage startups would benefit from. This is something that we truly believe in at Mucker. And so we do these monthly sessions. Mucker, we're an early stage VC. We invest in seed and Series A. We also run an accelerator program called Mucker Lab. So if you're a founder looking for help, definitely go and take a look at Mucker's website and find more information there, or you could reach out to me and ask me questions. But really, the star of today's session are Preet and Haley. So uh, excited to have the both of you guys share your story about how you guys are building Octagos using an AI first approach. So I'm going to be taking notes myself, but I'll hand it over to you guys and you guys can get started.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Maybe Haley and I can just give a quick overview of our background so that way everyone has a little bit more context before we get into um, the slides and whatnot. But my name is Harpreet Marwaha. I go by Preet. You can see my moniker. Actually, Party Preet is my DJ moniker that I use. I also got signed by a record label this past year, so check me out. Check out my music on Spotify. But
Cool.
I'm an
Awesome.
engineer by training and have slowly moved more and more over to the business side of the equation. I went to grad school at MIT and then was management consulting for a while, and I really love being in the tech business and startup space. I'm really excited to be here today. We've been part of the Mucker portfolio they've invested in our Series A and Series B. But I have been an EIR also at Mucker, and so Will and I used to work together back in the day.
Awesome.
I am not a DJ, nor am I signed record producer. I'm Haley Chute. I'm glad to be here with Mucker today and sharing some of our learnings, hard-won learnings. My background, I'm also an engineer by training, biomedical engineer. I've spent my career primarily all in healthcare, mainly in cardiology. So at some large companies, at some small companies, and definitely the major changes that are occurring in our space right now were some of what we're talking about today. So glad to be sharing that with you. And I'm looking forward to getting started. Do you want to switch over? Let's do it.
Cool.
All you, Preet.
So just for more context, we wanted to give you guys a little bit more about what Octagos is. So Octagos, we are primarily working with cardiologists and helping them remotely monitor their most intense cardiac patients. And these are patients that have a surgically implanted device, like a pacemaker, loop recorder, and defibrillator. And we use AI in our product. And so we are basically one of the greatest use cases of AI in that these devices are transmitting complex arrhythmia data all the time, uh, 24 hours a day, lots of transmissions, lots of data. And it's really hard for the cardiologist and their clinical team to stay on top of the data. And so we use AI as a first pass to contextualize the data, triage the data, and basically really make it easy for these cardiologists to remotely monitor these patients and address any issues that come up. And so today, we are almost over, I guess, nearing 1 million patients on the platform, over 300 clinics. On our platform. And so we are processing a large volume of data, and we use AI throughout the product to really help our internal team and our customers and our patients get the best healthcare. And all these things have been proven medically, and we're really driving, lowering the cost of healthcare, and we're really driving efficiency in this hard ecosystem. And today, we're not going to be talking about the AI in our product where we're receiving a lot of value. We're going to be talking about AI and how we use it internally. So I think the three core topics that Haley and I are really going to focus on are how we got started, how we decided what to do, how to do it. Two is going into examples usage, and since we have Haley who's been driving a lot of the effort, we're going to be focusing a lot on some of the core use cases around marketing and product, but we also have usage across the entire company. And then finally, what are our major learnings and where we're going with it next. At a high level, and feel free to chime in, Haley. I know you have a ton of background in this as well, but it really starts from the top. A lot of the workforce today isn't AI native. And so even though these tools have been around for the last 5 years, they still take time to adopt. And so fortunately for us is our CEO is a major tinkerer. He is a cardiologist. He's one of those jack of all trades kinds of people. He also has a computer science degree. And so he founded this company, was using AI on the product side of the thing because he thought it was critical for AI to process large volumes of data. But internally, he became our champion and mandated it across the board. I think it was around Christmas when Claude really adoption started taking off. We were texting each other of saying, hey, how this is beneficial. We started vibe coding. Haley started vibe coding. We all started using the tools. And then we had an all hands meeting where we just made it a mandate across the organization. And at first, it was slower to adopt because people don't want to change how they're doing things. People don't necessarily trust. When you get autopilot in your car, you still keep your hands on, you have your foot by the brake, but then you get more and more comfortable using self-driving and you start trusting it more. And so the same thing happened for us internally, which is it's really hard for people to they say they're going to use it or they say they used it as maybe as like a basic chat prompt, but they're not really using it in their day-to-day work. And so we forced everybody to take on training, prove that they took the training by sharing their certificate across like the company-wide Teams or Slack channel. We found internal champions to basically onboard people and manually screen share and do things to make sure that people were using it and got their first win using AI. And then we started asking these questions like, do we need to hire or can we do things with AI? And I don't know, Haley, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, as an AI first company, like this is not certainly not our first forte into AI. I think that what we're describing here in this webinar is one use case of our AI. We certainly have had other use cases, as Preet shared. We're specifically talking about our use, not necessarily this is not related to the AI that we provide to patients and clinicians. But I will say that we're, as a group, relatively open to changing things, to trying new things. And that's a really wonderful thing about startup culture in general. But I think the real switches here were about learning a new skill in a way that a language is a new skill. Like you're just not necessarily thinking in it. And I think people had to learn to think in AI in a way that they weren't doing otherwise. And so I think a lot of the learnings, and even quite frankly, the mandate came from people sharing the work that they were doing in AI, and whether it's a vibe coded dashboard that we're making instead of watching Netflix, or it's something that something that we've created. It's those shares have been part of the learning as well. Like, oh, I had no idea you could do that with AI. Like, let me try something, and it would inspire people. So I think that that's definitely been part of it. And just because it became something that we are literally talking about on a daily basis has definitely been part of that. The mandate became quite part of the culture here for us to take this approach. So that's all I would add.
Awesome. So I think how do you have this mandate, but then how do you enable it? And so we had to look across all of our teams and figure out where is this going to be adopted? How are we going to use it? And so each of us as leaders of different parts of the organization had to go internally to figure out what were the things that we could offload? What are the things that we are trying to answer? And initially, I think the first part of it was, well, it has to connect to things that matter. And so as we were starting to ask those kinds of questions, you know, there were some blind spots around getting access to engineering. How can we build KPIs and dashboards around certain areas or business problems that typically were taking our engineering team longer? And so we started enabling those parts of the organization that historically didn't have the best dashboards or the best KPIs or needed a lot of more validation, and started connecting Claude into those systems. And so there are some systems where they have APIs or they have MCPs built in, because this is we're starting like still in the infancy of the AI journey, but a lot of other companies were already adopting it and making their platforms available in MCP formats. But there's a lot of infrastructure, especially in healthcare, that doesn't have that access. And so we looked at it across the organization and said, hey, where can we get going right away with tools that already exist in the marketplace and the ecosystem? And then these other ones where we had to build our own connectors, those took a little bit of time because we had to figure out we're a regulated industry. So we have to be very careful about HIPAA compliance and PHI, and we need to make sure how we access these things and read-write access. And so we had to build an internal infrastructure around our own data and how we access who we give permissions to, especially in areas where you're not able to connect into an LLM easily through existing MCPs or APIs. And so I think you need to ask, one, what system you're going to use. And so we use Claude. And then two, based on where you are in the organization, what systems and tools need that connectivity, and then how you go do it. And so all those things need to come together in order for you to make the best use of getting out of your own personalized chat version of Claude into more organizational usage.
I'd add to that too. I think that's where like the real win is, right? The siloed version of AI is not so different than what we were doing before Claude was available to us, where it was like people using other LLM of ChatGPT, choose your favorite flavor. But I think what really made the difference for our organization was that like there was a mandate for everybody, and quite literally all of these teams are now on it. They're all using it for different reasons, but we're accessing the same databases. We have access to the same numbers, and so you really get the advantage of scale when all of these teams are connected to all of those systems. So that's what I'd add. And so I think at this point, we would say we're in the AI enabled state. Engineering uses this as their first as their first stop. We utilize Claude Code to build. We use in product, we create our designs first and hand it as pretty and clean and functional as possible over to engineering in an automated way through Claude. And we'll show some examples of what that looks like. From a data perspective, as Preet shared, prior to this, it took time to build dashboards. And so there wasn't necessarily always an available dashboard for folks if they wanted to get numbers. And the availability of dashboards also comes from people who have the knowledge base to write in SQL, right? And so to make their own dashboards that way. So now we have you can write it in plain language and ask your questions. And so that's how most of the early stuff was done. And now that's how we've continued, especially when we're trying to decide what we want to build. We're utilizing platforms like this. From a product perspective, as I mentioned, and I'll share some examples there, we ideate in Claude. We build in Claude Code. We're connected through design. And then all those items are sent through Azure DevOps, which is our dev platform, via CLI. So we literally in the terminal, in the teams, the product team that was never in a terminal window doing dev work is now utilizing that space in plain language through Claude Code. From a sales perspective, we utilize it with our CRM. So some folks are spending more time in Claude writing to the CRM or pulling from the CRM than actually in the CRM itself. We're able to do projections through that because of all the data that we filled in there, and pull documentation, pull like on-brand proformas from the work that we've built in there. On operations, Preet, I'll leave this one to you to speak to, but I'll speak to marketing. The on-brand piece, I think people think of that use case, but it goes pretty deep if you get pretty good at this in terms of making something that looks, speaks, and feels like a brand that anybody can do. And I think that's the real scalability that we've seen from a marketing team. And the marketing team that we have could be the functionality of 2 to 3x now based on the amount of stuff that we're able to do because we've built the skills into Claude. Anything you'd want to add here, Preet?
No, I think what's been really impressive is when you enable these organizations and teams, they don't have to be engineers, and they can use natural language to access now really critical data. And then when you use the AI system, and as you guys have all experienced those aha moments where when you connect, I think there's another aha moment when you connect across disparate systems. And so account management obviously deals with customer facing stuff, but that customer facing stuff deals with tech issues, Jira tickets, our phone support system, our clinical team. And so in order to really understand what's going on with a given account, we would have to log into one tool and look at the conversation and try to assess what's happening. But now with the Claude integration, it'll not only tell you what's the communication is with the customer, but it'll tell you what Jira tickets are open, what phone calls are going through to their, how many calls were made to their patients and so forth. And it tells you a full end-to-end picture of what is happening. And those insights are really useful to troubleshoot, debug, prioritize, and it really allows someone who isn't technical to take a first pass, become smart about the problem, and really have a hypothesis for what to do and what to do next. And so I think these magic moments are popping up across the organization. It's really driving a lot of speed at our company. It's really driving a lot of problem solving in a great way. And I think when you combine these kinds of disparate systems, it unlocks the organization in a way that wasn't really calculated before. You would have to hire people, or you would have to build a real product to really enable those kinds of things. And now these insights are happening almost on a daily, weekly basis. And it's really impressive and mind-blowing to see the level of insight and the quality of work that can get done now.
Okay. Hey, Preet and Haley, I do want to ask a question from the audience that I think is an important one. But if you could keep it short, because I do want to make sure we get to the good stuff. All right, we're 20 minutes in, and we want to get to how you did it and a specific example. So let's spend a lot
Sure.
of time on that as opposed to like get it to set up. But the question is, someone asked, uh, how are you thinking about choosing one tool, in this case, Claude, Anthropic, versus the other AI tools out there? Are you guys worried about getting locked in or missing out on advancements in the other AI tools out there?
That's a good question. You want to take it, Preet? Happy to.
Sure. I think there are lots of things where there are a lot of deciding factors. For us, some of the factors are given that we're a regulated industry, we need a HIPAA compliant tool and we have to protect our data. And so there are a lot of factors that may be external to your choices here. And then I think these models are changing every day. There's different tools that maybe different teams need. And I think some companies have a harness that allows them to attach to multiple LLMs. And so, depending on your circumstances and situations, you may have different decision criteria for what tools you pick and how you pick them. For us, it was more about ease of Claude and obviously the regulatory requirements that it enabled us to maintain. And then I think the key thing was it was about ease and speed of that we could push it through to everybody
Totally.
versus analysis paralysis on, hey, which tool should we use? How should we? And so Claude had a lot of connections for the different tools that we're using in-house. And so we just ran with it, but we've adjusted along the way. We've connected into other things, or we specialize, or we use different versions of Claude in different areas. And so it was a lot of try this, move fast, figure it out. If it breaks, keep iterating.
Yeah, I'll just add and then we can move forward. I think we've got an hour together, and so we're talking about this instance. The marketing team still uses ChatGPT because the messaging is it's still our preferred message. And so we still use that for a lot of writing, even though we have Claude. I will also say that later on we'll talk about some of the ways we've actually pulled out of Claude and into other ways of doing it. And so I think this became an opportunity for us to move fast and not break too much. We could train up on free tools. Everyone could get certified. Like all of that was just available in a blink. And so something that would have been otherwise, say, a 6-month process became maybe a 3 weeks process, at least to get started. So that's really why we just jammed ourselves into this one. I think that's the point of this as well. The connections, some of them were easy, and that's part of why we chose to take this approach. I think as we get next month, if we were to watch this webinar later on in August or September, maybe that green box is going to be bigger and more full of these official MCPs. And so we are lucky that we were able to connect quite easily into a lot of the systems we're already using. But on the right side, you'll see we had to build a lot. Our database is a build, and access to our code was a build. And so we needed a champion house that was able to help us do that. Engineering is we were also very strong in engineering. We have a very large engineering team. And so we had those guys in it first and built out a lot of the systems, and then other ones we're adding on as well. So I'm going to move into the examples because I know that's why we're here. I'd love to start. So there are two things. I think we'll start in marketing because I think it's the things that people think about first. Just wetting the palate a bit. Before Claude, marketing or my team would take on requests. And because we want to make sure that we're showing the brand in the way in which it should be shown, we would manage that. We would iterate whatever the request is, we'd build the deck, and then we would send it back, and we would have that relay loop of iterations. Now the sales team directly utilizes Claude based on tool sets that we've made, such that they can access it themselves. And they have access to making newly branded newly branded pitch decks based on templates we make. We also can automatically update that for them. So the next time they make their pitch deck, it is on brand as well. So that's like where we've moved. There are a couple of different ways that we're utilizing it now. I wanted to share, I'm going to skip forward from the brand and come back to it. I think this one's, actually, let me go to this. So in practice, we've got these instant pitch decks. So we've actually built the design system. If you have not played with Claude Design, you should play with Claude Design. It's not that hard to do. I say that having a designer who have done that for us, but basically teaching it all of the brand skills. And then anyone can put their prompt in, design me a deck for this specific customer based on a prompt, and build a deck that looks like this with the actual logo, not like a version of the logo, with our actual brand font. All of those pieces are exactly where they should be. I think the other important part of this is that the first time is the one, right? We've continued to make this stronger. We've continued to make the instructions stronger and the templates stronger. But I would say that this is the biggest leap forward from Claude build me a pitch deck to Claude build me a pitch deck that I actually want to present to a customer, is using a skill like this. So this is certainly something that I think pretty much anybody can build. If you have a brand template already, you can probably build this on your own. And I would recommend taking this as a first step. It sales, yes, marketing for sure. But all teams have to present, whether it's to each other or to a different group. And now you can present basically from a just like writing, right? You just write a text prompt in, and you can get an on-brand pitch deck out. So this is one of the big assets that we've used. I would say from a slightly more technical perspective, something that might take a little bit longer to build, but we've invested in, is pipeline intelligence. For the marketing team, again, this is something I would have hired for this year, and I haven't needed to, because we've been able to really add and connect across disparate systems into single sources. So for example, all of our new leads and targets, we have connected Claude to look at our CRM, our digital advertising, emails that come in, and we've built dashboards and then automatic updates that go into our Teams messages when we have a new lead come in. For our Monday readouts, we have basically a slide that's built for us that we copy and paste. It's built into the exact format that we need it to, so we can literally just copy and paste. It's not a graphic, it's a PowerPoint slide. So we're utilizing these across different systems. I think the other ones that are really helpful and impactful for us is I do a competitive briefing every day. When I open up my laptop, I have a competitive briefing on all of my competitors, what they have posted on their website, what is on their social media, what someone in the sales team put on Teams or sent in an email, or a meeting that's up on the calendar about competitors. And so every morning that is available to me to see and then to act on, and we can send that off to our team. Maybe it's time to do a new competitive intelligence. And actually, and the other part of it that's even more important on that, not only updating me and my teams, but also updating the database of competitive intelligence that we have. So we pull from those every day, we scrape and we pull it into our database. So now that anytime that we need to update competitive information, we have what has come in that way as well.
For these daily automations, did you set it up as a scheduled task to run?
Yeah, scheduled tasks, I think, is really an easy way to do it. And I think we also, so I use the scheduled tasks. I use the artifacts is typically what we utilize. The nice thing about artifacts is you can share them across teams. I think one of the limitations we've had is you can build a skill and you can like pull out the files and send the files to somebody. But at least with an artifact, I can send an artifact right now, and he's going to pop up the dashboard that I'm using right now and see it himself. So we utilize that. We've also, because we have the technical capability, we've also built this into GitHub, and now we have these admin dashboards. I'm not talking about that today, but that's been a really massive change for us, for like a lot of teams to see the same information at the same time, and not just like a single dashboard, right? So like we've got a whole website worth of like information that we built just for us for intelligence, targeting, et cetera. That's a great question.
And
Anything you
I was going to ask for like these types of dashboards and reports, specifically related to things like pipeline performance. Do you have an owner that makes sure that whatever the artifacts are producing looks accurate and it's in the right format and everyone's on the same page? Or is it like, hey, whoever has access can query the database from HubSpot and make their own dashboards?
I think the answer is yes. It's both.
Both. Okay.
Depends on the team and what they're doing. We're in small teams, so there is like a person who owns something for us. And I think probably much of the Mucker audience is also in small teams, right? So they've got like one or two people that are handling a certain type of thing. So I have one person that does update that dashboard, but you better believe that if she makes a change, she's going to share her artifact and I'm going to replace it. So that's how we handle it. It's their responsibility to make sure it's updated. But like on this little slide that behind the digital marketing leads thing, like if I want ROI, I tell her, she updates it and she brings it over. I would love if we get to a point where we can all both update the same artifact without having to go through GitHub and all of that. But at the moment, that's where we are. I'm sure that'll come out next week.
Okay.
But there are a lot of challenges in the beginning when you use it, because there is a lot of AI slop. What happens is you start prompting
Totally.
and you start vibe coding or whatever it is, and does a really good job on 80%. And so then you're like, oh, but it's problematic on this last 20%. And then you start fixing that last 20%, and then it breaks the original 80%. And so I think unfortunately, the way some of these tools work is that you have to iterate, you have to validate, and that has to be built into your process. Otherwise, you're sharing bad data or just generally directional data, and then you're back to square one, which is you're not making really informed or intelligent decisions. And so I think it's really critical that you have the validation in it, especially because especially if you're sharing it across the organization and it's really important data.
Totally. There are two other pieces that I would add to that, which I think are helpful. At least that I've found helpful. I'm sure other people in the audience have other ways that they've dealt with this. The first for me is that AI slop and human slop are very similar. If you write a bad prompt, you're going to get bad stuff out. So being really careful about how you write your prompts. And it feels so easy to write something quick and see something come out, but the quick and dirty will be dirty coming back. And so getting really skilled in prompt writing is important. As fun as it is to just get an answer right away, you will get a better answer if you spend the time to write a prompt. And that's not to say you can't use it to be creative and think through something, but if you want to get something out of it, that's going to be something you're going to share across teams. Maybe you start over. Like you built that dashboard the first time. I'm going to make a new version of that in a fresh prompt and build it out. Like now that I know exactly what I want and where it's going to pull from, I found that to be helpful. The other thing I found to be helpful, I don't know if this is Claude approved, but I ask one Claude window to check on another sometimes. And I have it run back through, and sometimes we find errors. And so those are things, as I learn the language of AI, I'm using that as an opportunity also to find problems with the things that we've built. So those are really important.
Let me ask you an overall question, because I do also want to keep us going, because we'd love to see these examples. But I get this question a lot, which is related to earlier you mentioned connecting to GitHub. Okay, so most go-to-market teams don't operate out of GitHub or repositories like that. So maybe you could talk a little bit high level in terms of how you're using repos or file systems, and how do you manage the context files that's necessary to run a lot of these things across a team.
Super. I'll get there in product. Can we do that in product?
Awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Super. All right. One other thing on the marketing side, and then we'll move into product to answer that question. It's a very good one. This isn't really marketing, but it's another thing that you can do today. And I honestly talk to any one of my friends that you see someone for coffee and you ask what they're doing with AI. This is what I tell people to do. Use AI to make your day easier by doing like a morning briefing. I do this. I have my team members do this as well, where I ask it to look at all the systems that I would otherwise scroll through on my phone or on my laptop in the morning and make me a morning briefing. I want to know what is important to me that day so that I start the day at a run instead of a jog. So what I recommend with this is like, what are the things that are important? So I tell Claude, of course, you're looking at my email, my calendar, my team's messages, that it also pulls from my competitive briefing, those kinds of things. And then I say, I want to hear, maybe if it's from Preet, I want to know about that regardless. Or if it's from someone else on the team, I want to know about that regardless. Or maybe it's contracts I always want to know about. I have that briefing, and that's the first place I start. And so in many ways, like we talk about alert triage in the work that we do with humans and the things that need to be dealt with immediately. This is my version of alert triage for my day so that I start with what's most important and I can get to the rest later. And so at this point, I'm not even reading or going through emails until the end of the day, unless it's been flagged. And I think that's a really important way to think about like using our time more wisely. It easily saves me 30 minutes. And that's something you can set up in like, you can set it up in 30 minutes and it schedules and it briefs me, and I'll have it brief me on Claude and also send me a message. So I find that to be really helpful. All right, let's get into the more technical question. Okay, so on the product side, I do want to just like briefly state that this stuff takes time and that you're not going to build Rome in a day. On the product team side, you'll see at the top of this quarters, right? So each of these columns is one quarter, early and late in a quarter. So we did move pretty fast, but we took things step by step. So on the product side, when we're iterating and creating new ideas that are put into our product, we started with manual pieces. We pulled in ChatGPT, and then we moved into Google AI, and we built it out a little bit at a time. Then we obviously got into Claude Desktop and then Claude Code. But you can break these things into small chunks and make it much more viable to get done. It doesn't need to be a big daunting exercise. And of course, as you can see in like the design section, obviously the MCPs make a big difference there too. Anything you want to add on this before we get into the design systems?
No, I think the key thing here, and I think someone asked this question, is like, how did you pick? And like, this shows how we went through our own evolution of like, and then a lot of it is experimenting. And these models are changing all the time. And so I think you have to keep on top of like, you have to listen to the podcast, you have to go into Reddit, you have to, if you be an evangelist on your own to know these are again for the people who are driving this change. But for once you pick a system, I think lower stream, it's a lot easier to say, hey, we're using this and get the teams using something consistently. But it's harder at the beginning because you're on disparate systems and they all need to talk. And you don't really get the insight until you start moving towards a connected and one ecosystem.
Totally. All right,
Let
let's
me
get
ask
to
a
that repo
question.
question.
Let me
Okay,
ask a
no, go
question
ahead,
about the
Tony. Yeah,
product
yeah,
side. So on our last screen, a
yeah,
lot of this is about product development, product management, mockups, and things like that, front end stuff. But on the bottom, very bottom, management and reporting, are you guys actually using Claude Code for vibe coding tied to your database? And if so, how
totally.
do you get around things like, this is actually one of the questions from the audience, personal information, PII, PHI, especially in your industry, if it's exposed to potential data within your database?
That's a great question. So to go back to what Preet had mentioned before in terms of like the considerations of who we chose. So Claude Enterprise is PHI compliant, which is why we had to take that choice. I will also say that not everyone has the same access, right? And so like when to go to the repo question, when the product team is iterating and looking at information, they have read-only capability. They don't have access to the patient information. We're looking at code as a copy version of it. We're not giving them access to like real patient data. And so just like we're limited prior to this, we maintain those same boundaries. Those are still there. PHI is incredibly important. And so we've had to be very careful about that. Said there are places where we have wanted to be very, we've taken the choice to use Claude Enterprise for that PHI portion. And Preet, do you want to add?
We
Probably
have like
good.
the appropriate sandboxes, use dummy data, and we actually use AI to make the dummy data and so forth. So I
Yeah,
think that all those precautions, especially in a regulated industry, you have to take. And so I think um, you have to make sure that the protocols and the rules in which your agents operate align to your core values as a product and the offering that you are providing to the end users. And in our cases, it's the cardiologists and the patients. And so we have to be very sensitive to those kinds of things. And so those types, once you start adopting, you're going to have to figure out which teams and who has access and build those protocols in-house so you don't overstep or and who has read access, who has any access, and
totally.
so forth. And so that governance is really a critical step.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, techie. So repo as in repository for those who aren't used to that terminology. So we actually put this on a marketer's desktop the other day too, but we have duplicated our database and allow folks, their product marketing in this case, to ask questions of our database via Claude. So for in the marketing example, she is able to learn about our software, our customer facing software by asking Claude questions of our code. That's why she has it on here. So our product team is doing that too. And so to your question about like, how are they engaging? Claude has access to our code. Our product folks have the context of the code via Claude. If they are designing a new feature, they're telling Claude via whatever they want to say, that will be designed via Figma. So Figma is a user interface software that we utilize here. So we put the prompt in, we use the MCP to Figma. We go back and forth a couple times until we build in Claude Design and then we go back and forth to Figma. When we're happy with that, then we push it via Claude again to our Azure DevOps. And so that becomes a ticket that has the code, it has all the visuals. It is effectively like the full recipe and picture of the thing that we want built with the code in it, of course. And so then the engineering team takes it, refines it as necessary, it goes through QA, et cetera. And so the ultimate the ultimate product is what the product team envisioned. And so I'll show you what that looks like. And there are some dependencies on how that works. So here's like an example quickly of how that would look like. So because we have those setups on their dashboard, they now can say something like, number one, generate a new user modal prompt, right? And so we're asking that of Claude. And you can do that in the terminal window. You can do that in the Claude code on your desktop now that has that functionality. It will create for me, based on our code and the context and the part that I'll show you next, which is our design system, which is separate from our marketing design. It will create for me a modal window. We will go back and forth, make some of those improvements based on what we like, we don't like. And then we'll convert that into our Figma files via Claude code. It'll generate that front end for us. And then we will have the front end team develop through Claude as well, build that out. And so you can see that like the similarity between what we might ask of Claude and what we actually get out in the end is like incredibly similar. And that ends up being what's put in the platform. That said, a couple of things that are important here. We have a UI UX designer. He is overseeing all of this. He's making sure that the buttons are right. He reviews the things. All that stuff is there. So while we have the system that works for us the way we intend, we are not willing to like let go of some design review in some cases. A lot of the stuff gets passed through, but we have an opportunity for design review. So that's always something to keep in mind again. We've also had that. Let me just take this and then I want you to chime in, Preet. I think the other thing that's important is that whole design system and anything that's new has been built out in a design system as well. So we have a design system where you have like literal buttons. We've built out all of the buttons that we would want on our UI, just like you would have for any other UI system. So it's not, because we care so much about the way it looks, we're not just allowing Claude to make the buttons that it thinks it should make. We have told it what we think, what are the ingredients we're going to put into this recipe. And so we have that all built out. You can, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but we've got icons, colors, components, all of those pieces so that when you tell Claude you want a button, it will give you the right button. So that's important. Preet, go ahead.
I think this is a great use case of building something new, but a lot of times when you're starting, you're already starting with code that's already been built. And so sometimes to really use the AI tools to understand how the code works, how to QA the code to make sure that it works properly. And so all these different things now are being implemented into this. And so this is a great use case of beginning to end. But there are a lot of times where you're starting in the middle and you're troubleshooting, you're debugging. And so having Claude try to understand how the code was written, it's being written by all these different people. And so when you ask your Claude to look at your code, it gives you a lot of insights as to how it's working, what it's actually doing, what the limitations are, how it could be rewritten. And so you can even ask it to make it more efficient. And so it then reduces the cloud costs for us. And so there's a lot of these instances where this is a great use case of like beginning to end, but there are a lot of use cases in the middle or towards the end of like a development process where it's extremely helpful as well.
Cool. Why don't we get into the lessons? I know there's lots of questions. I'm sure we want to get to those. Super. Ooh, number one. Do you want to take this?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is getting a champion, connecting it to everything. When you connect it to everything, you really unlock a lot of insights that are hard to get. It makes your team move faster. Oftentimes your B plus players or your people who are your A minus players, they're not, they could be A players, but they're just limited by maybe engineering or resources that they may have. And so now when you give them Claude, go up by like a third of a grade easily just from having access to tools, getting their first hypothesis made on various types of problems. And so I think you can expand your workforce, like having all these agents work for you and do these things. It really is a multiplier. And so I think it makes you move faster. You have to connect it to everything. You have to have a champion.
Totally.
Can I ask a question on that or double click on
Please.
it? Because this is one of those things where a lot of people, the general world thinks AI is going to take over stuff and take over jobs. Well, some of that will be true, but I guess my question to you is, especially the two of you as leaders within your company, right? How has that shifted the way that you think about your existing team? And how do you best work with them and utilize them? Like what you were talking about, Preet, they become A minus to A plus players, or also how you are thinking about building your team for the next 6 months. If you're hiring, what are you looking for, right? Because I imagine before AI, you guys would look and run your teams and manage your teams and set up areas of responsibilities in a certain way. Now you guys are using Claude. How has that shifted your thinking and how you organize your specific teams and how to build on those teams?
Can I jump on that one?
Sure. I think we touch it a little bit on the next lesson, which is um, you have to have human in the loop. And so I think there are a few pieces here by what human in the loop means. One is the people are really important. They're the ones who have the ideas. They're the ones who have like the relationships. They're the ones who have the understanding of how some of these systems initially work. There's always going to be reluctance because most of the workforce that we are dealing with was not schooled in AI products. The kids today are learning AI and use AI usage at school. The adults in the workforce today are learning it on their own. And so there is a lot of hesitancy. There's an adoption curve to picking it up. And I think you need to make sure that people have their early wins. They need to be tinkering on their own. You need to, force them to do things. And there is a lot of nervousness, especially around engineering. My job going to go away? Or even in very specialized organizations, like within my finance side, there's nervousness around, hey, will AI be able to model better than me? And so I think that quickly disappears once you realize, like, hey, AI, while it gets you started, it may not be the answer for all these things because there's errors or issues, but it helps you take a first pass. It helps you get going. And so I think that people have realized that they need to learn these tools, but it's not necessarily going to take away their job. It does change your hiring in the future, though. I think that when you previously couldn't move on because a KPI was missing or the data was really hard to organize and it took a lot of human effort to like sit down and brainstorm and connect disparate data sources together, that part has gone away. And so we aren't thinking necessarily how do we solve this? Do we need a new person? We first think what are we really trying to solve? We may have to iterate and really learn like what the real question we're trying to answer and what metric we're really trying to move. And we use AI for that hypothesis. And then we decide, oh wow, like this really needs a person. And so it's slowed our hiring. I don't think our hiring has stopped. It's just slowed our hiring in a way that where we're more deliberate and we're more focused and we know exactly the resource we're looking for. And we look for people who are problem solvers, who are go-getters. And that's part of it is being a startup and having that mentality anyway, that we're player coaches. None of us are just managers or we're doing a lot of the work ourselves.
Cool.
I might just add on the hiring point. I think flexibility is probably the major thing that I'm looking for these days. Like, are you able to learn something new? And I think probably a lot of us are, but they may not be willing to. This is one thing we're learning. Next couple months, we're going to learn a different version of this. And so when I hire now, I'm looking for people who are curious, creative, and flexible. So I think that's really important. In terms of how it's impacted their jobs, to get to that question, I would say that even my like manager level folks who have never had the like have never really thought about how to speak about the value of their work now have a tool to do it. Like if they're not particularly number savvy, I can help them. They can iterate and they can basically show the value of their work now in ways that they weren't able to. So, an example, we have a wonderful event manager. She's been doing this for decades. She used to rely on a software. She's now making dashboards. It took her a while and it took a lot of engagement with our stakeholders, but she is a capable person and she is learning how to do it. So she's learning the new software. So I think another person on my team similarly is able to build her own dashboards now for things that she may have never felt like she had the confidence to do the calculations herself. She has help with that. So I think in many ways, like it's different whether you've got a very tech savvy team, they use AI one way, but even the non-tech savvy team, if they're willing to get their hands dirty and just try stuff, they have abilities that they never had access to. And I think that that's really valuable. So
I think that's something I really want to dig into a little bit more, which is you got this top-down mandate from your CEO about, hey, we want to be AI first. Uh, did you guys implement any sort of, programs, trainings, different things to
yes.
get all the organization on the same boat? Or is it just like, hey, go and try and just start to experiment yourself? Like, I'm curious to know what you
Yes.
guys did.
So there's a bit of both, right? You're not going to learn anything until you tinker with it yourself. We have a couple things at our disposal. One, there's literally free training. I think it's called Skill Jar that anyone can access on how to use Claude. Everyone was responsible for learning it. Literally everyone on my team who at the time we weren't even sure how much they were going to use AI, they all had to learn it.
Did
So
you
we
track
definitely
them
mandated that.
did you
Say again?
track or measure
We
KPIs or
tracked.
things?
You know,
Yeah.
we made sure everyone sent their little certificate that
Oh,
they
good.
learned AI.
Okay.
It's silly, but it was important. And then one person's doing it, the next person's like, okay, I guess it is important. So we
Mhm.
definitely mandated it that way. We thought it was really
Okay.
important that everyone understood, and it was free. You could literally just you could do it. I've got friends who are doing it now because they thought it was interesting and it was a way in when they didn't know how to engage with it. So there was that. We now make it part of our onboarding training. So when you get hired by Octagos, you go through Claude training. So
Mhm.
everyone is starting out with that basis. I've got a new hire in here. It's her third day. She has got a repo. She's in marketing. She's got a repo on her desktop and she is learning the code. She's learning the system through the code. So that's a major advantage for someone onboarding. Like it's not, I don't have to put her in front of one of my really highly valuable, very busy people to teach her the basics. She can learn the basics herself. So I think that that's another part of it.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
have
know.
to ask you guys to do
Yeah.
another session on how you set up your onboarding then.
Oh, no,
Something
it's
else on
fun.
the
So we have that. And then we also have someone here who's like, it's probably not his entire job because everyone has so many jobs, but one of his major jobs is to make sure that like he greases the wheels. So if I get stuck, I reach out to him. If I need a refresher, I reach out to him. If I have an idea and I don't know how to solve it, I reach out to him. So we definitely, I think it's really important to have like, you have your champion, and that champion can be you. You can be your own champion. You don't necessarily have to hire someone as long as you're willing to like dig in and learn it. But it's very helpful for the org to have someone who really digs in. So I know we're running short on time. I think on this one, the only last thing I would say is that the slop is a major problem. I would urge you guys, anyone listening, to read your own AI outputs before you send them to someone else. Otherwise, you're passing a problem forward. I've done it myself. You show up at a meeting, you've got something you thought you generated, you thought you knew what it said because you put the prompt in, you thought you read it. You have to double check it. I have noted that the difference for me with working with AI versus working with a human is that when I've worked with someone long enough, I know what things they might get wrong and I know what to check. With AI, it's a little different. You don't have that personality. You have to check everything. It's like working with an intern. And so, like an intern, you don't know. So I think that is really important that we don't pass the AI slap forward because that's not making something better. That's adding more work to someone else's plate. So that's something we learned the hard way. I think we're still learning it. I'm still making this mistake. Like I think we all are. If you haven't presented that slide, you probably don't know it well enough. Just because AI's made it doesn't mean it's right. So I think there's a lot of that needs to get handled too. And I think we're getting better at it as an org and probably as a population, but AI slop is a problem for everybody. And do not send something to someone else unless you have actually know what it says and you've checked it. So that's on this. I think the scalability, we touched on this a little bit. I think this graphic on the right, I think is really important. And this is how we also goes back to the human portion of it, which is like, how much are we doing ourselves? How much are we passing off entirely? And how much are we semi-holding? So I think that that's definitely important. And figuring that out, and that'll change over time too. We can pass off more and more as we go. I think the other thing that we've done, and I'll move into this and Preet, if you want to share anything else. This I think is really important because we talked at the very beginning, excuse me, we had a question about how did you choose what to do? And you're basically choosing a platform, right? So of course, we're a creative company. We do a lot of different things. We've found that some of the things we don't do with Claude anymore because it doesn't make sense for us to continue to ask Claude to do the exact same dashboard if we can build it into Power BI and do it with less polls and less cost and all of that. So that's definitely important. But we've used it as like a creative tool, right? So now that I've gotten those dashboards going after a while, we're going to now move them into that, our GitHub and whatever. So like there is an iterative process to this. So I think that that's important. So that's one of the things we did. We also moved out of a very expensive version, this enterprise version that's PHI compliant for the teams that don't touch anything that has to do with patient. Like there's no risk of it. Or if you're iterating on an email, like you do not need Claude Enterprise to do that. So we have some people in a team plan. We have some people who have both. Like I go in between plans depending on what I have to work on, and that makes it cheaper for the company. Yada yada. So that I think that's also really important. And as I mentioned, the heaviest dashboards, like you can rebuild these as we've talked about before. It's like it doesn't the token pull can be decreased depending on the model that you're using, the way you set up your data, et cetera. And so we've been more and more intelligent about that. Anything you want to add on this one before we go to economics?
I think you covered it.
Okay. All right. Economics. This is you, my friend.
I think the core thing here is that AI costs can add up real quick. We've all read those memes and stories and whatnot. And I think there are cost offsetting components of AI too, because you're hiring maybe slower, hiring differently, or you're not spending as much on um, other tools or other services that you would have utilized in lieu of having an AI-based solution. But I think the key thing here is the models are changing all the time. Kimi K3 disrupted everything. It's the big talk of what's happening. And so there are ways to insource, there are ways to offset, there are ways to use different harness tools. And I think the big thing here is that the tools are changing so fast that we're going to need a brand new set of tools around I know Block came out with Buzz, and Buzz integrates Slack into with your agents. And so we need tools to talk to our agents directly, to manage them, to spawn them. And so I envision a workplace where I myself can have hundreds of agents, thousands of agents working for me, doing all these tasks repeated on a repeated basis. And that may require an open source solution in order to manage that cost infrastructure. So I think the biggest thing here is you got to look at this. Don't let it slow you down in the beginning, because getting the answer is worth way more than not moving forward. I think the paralysis here is you got to just take a look at what your organization is doing, who's using it, and just iterate against those problems, just like you would problem solve any other area of your business. And at the end of the day, there's lots of way to show value on using AI and justifying, even if it gets really high, why it's making sense to do it that way in the short term.
Tony, I know we're at time. If we want
How many more
to,
slides do we have left?
This
well,
is
this was this, and then the end side. So however you
Okay.
want to take it,
No,
I would say,
let's take those last two slides. We could go a little
okay,
bit over if people want to
sounds
stick
good.
around.
I don't
Reed,
think
do you
these
want to
are
address
that
it?
critical. It's just
Okay,
this is just
super.
like this is just a summary of like what we went through, and so I think we're open to whatever format you want to take this in, Tony.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. We got a lot of questions that came in that we weren't able
We're
to
here.
address.
Let's do it.
But I don't want to take too much time because we did allocate 1 hour, this hour to it. So let me ask this, going back to the whole economic side of the house and model selection and stuff like that in team, right? So as you guys are onboarding team members who aren't up to date on the latest frontier model and what it does, how do you guys manage token usage and what models to use in what format and context? Now, obviously, for those that require touching sensitive data and PHI and stuff like that, I'm sure you have restrictions in place. But like, how do you make sure, especially for you, Preet, as the CFO, right? Like, how do you make sure that the costs don't balloon? And also, you're about to touch on this, but this is one of the questions. How do you justify, right? Like the value of the investment are there any metrics that you specifically, CFO, is looking at to say, yes, this is worth the investment for our business? Because you guys are a startup. You guys don't have unlimited war chest of resources.
Yeah. So I think we touched on a few of these key points earlier. Is in general, you have to have a few champions across the organization. One champion is how do you get it across the org, right? And we talked about having those kinds of trainers, those people who are going to help you make your first Claude code project and like publish it and so forth. And then you have these almost your own frontier leaders in the organization. And so I think at our company, it starts with myself or Haley or some of the leadership team will get access to Opus, the latest model, and we'll start using it and we'll learn what's working, what's not working. We'll have our engineers do the same thing and say, hey, like, you really need to push this out now. because like it has these benefits. And so it's coming from different parts of the organization. Previously, it would only come from engineering. And so now, because we all have access to these tools and we're all reading about what's going on and we all know what the latest trends are, I think that that mandate can come from anywhere now around, hey, I'm using it for this purpose, and I think we got to roll it out sooner rather than later, or hey, we really need to cautiously move forward on this. And so at the beginning, we used chat, co-work, code, and desktop. And so it was like there's so many versions. And so we really had to get better at like, hey, maybe this set of teams who are more administrative, they should just use the $20 a month version because it's not worth it to them to get hooked into all these other tools and services. And they're just using it for betterment, but they're not needing to have access to all the systems. And so we had to refine that because what happened is we started off in like the first month, it's like 10 grand. And you're like, okay, like not everyone has it. And then the next month it jumps up to 20,000 and you're like, oh, what happened? Like, and so what happens is you look at your token usage and you realize like who's using all your tokens and what are they using it on? Are they
Right.
using it for code? Or are they using it for dashboards? And we're like, okay, they're using it for dashboards. There's got to be a better way. Like you can't pull these things in real time on a daily basis or every minute. And so that just eats up all these tokens. So then we created an engineering team to insource those projects. And so then we look at it again the following month and it's 30 grand a month. And so we're like, okay, 30 grand a month, like we have a board meeting coming up. How do we want to talk about it? And so then we start looking at like, oh, look at our hiring decisions and how we've offset some of these hires and delayed some of these hires because we're really running. And so we're in the 30 to 40 grand. We're a Series B, 2 years into our Series B fundraise. We're spending about 40 grand a month or so on Claude. And so, but what it's offset our cloud expenses because we've asked it to optimize our cloud footprint, and it told us to do things about moving certain to smaller machines and different ways of accessing our data. And so our Azure and AWS costs have come down. And so, so I think there are things when you look at it on a purely numbers basis, while the cost is going up, I also look at all the other areas where it's offset or delayed or really accelerated our timeline and our roadmap, and our time to get capture revenue is getting better and faster, or our churn is getting lower. And so all these factors are really critical in knowing where you're using AI and then what metrics it's really impacting, because there's a real justification for all that speed and efficiency that you can gain when you look at it all together.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think that the other piece of it that comes to the training. So like in terms of like you should not be using Fable 5 for an email. So that some of that stuff comes through in our training, and there are benefits to you too. It doesn't just save money for the company. It's going to be faster if you use Sonnet to do an email versus Fable 5. So I think some of that stuff is like learnings. I'm a high offender for token usage as well. So I moved off of Enterprise and into Teams like earlier on for a lot of the stuff. So a lot of it's like tinkering and just paying attention to it. But we do set limits to token usage, and then you start to get like the little alerts. So people have that, they're aware of that. But we're not at a place where, I don't know what my camera's doing, sorry. We're not at a place where we're saying like, don't use AI. Like we're seeing that it's really making people efficient. But you have to just make smart choices. I think it's like anything else, just iterate. So, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we went 8 minutes over.
Sorry
Thanks
about
to
that.
all of you guys who are still sticking around. If you could flip to the last slide, I think we still have the conclusion slide we typically do. Okay. So just to wrap things up, again, the if you guys have questions, Haley and Preet put their kind not to put their email, so assume they're okay with you guys reaching out to them. If you guys have additional questions, definitely reach out to them or reach out to me. If you have questions about Mucker itself or just anything general, we do these sessions every month. And sometimes we get one of our portfolio companies like Octagos to come and share their learnings. And sometimes we get third-party experts from our operating experts program. But basically, we do these sessions every month to go deep into a particular topic that helps founders and startup operators. So if you have any other topics that you guys are interested in, we're always open to ideas. We've got a few lined up already for the next few months, but again, we're always open to ideas. So uh, type it in chat or email it to my colleague here, Justin at muckercapital.com. And then lastly, again, if you guys are a founder and would like to get help funding, as you could probably tell, Mucker, we're very big on not just investing money, but we also invest time and work together with our founders and founding team to make sure we're on the right path. So if you are interested, go find more information about Mucker on the website. We have an accelerator, as I mentioned early in the call. So for those of you that are in the early part of your startup journey, check that out. And of course, ask Haley and Preet about their experience working with Mucker. So anyhow, thanks the two of you. This was fantastic. I wish we could set up a 2-hour session for this. So maybe I'll ping you guys
Next time.
offline about some of the other things we're doing. But thanks to everyone who stuck through this, and we'll see you guys at the next session.